maintain a slave class and the mistaken idea of white supremacy. He may have been a great warrior, but he fought against the second paragraph of the United States Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These rights were denied to the majority of black slaves in our state and would have continued to be denied under a Confederacy government that had that effort succeeded. Although defeated in war, the former Confederate states were not ready to accept the equality of the races. Consider the systematic dismantling of Reconstruction, where prison labor was substituted for slave labor from blacks that were disproportionately imprisoned, which continues to this day. Blacks were intimidated and threatened with violence by citizens. Even today, we see examples of police brutality against our black citizens. Jim Crow laws were established to maintain a separate but unequal society, which gave the white communities better services than the black communities. The General Alfred Mouton Monument celebrates a fictional, sanitized Confederacy, ignoring the terrorism that it stood for. It was intended to send a message to the black community about who was still in charge. We're being given an opportunity to acknowledge the dark time in our history, to remember that our economy was built on the backs of enslaved and exploited black citizens, and that General Alfred Mouton would have maintained that system in perpetuity given the chance. Let's move this monument to a more appropriate home, such as the Confederate Training Ground and Cemetery, Moore Park, where it can be with those who would have served under his command and are buried in the cemetery there. Then let's work together to put in the former location of the monument a symbol, whatever it may be, that represents our entire community, such as a pavilion, electric vehicle charging station, garden, or other appropriate structure. To paraphrase former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich's words, true patriotism is about coming together for the common good, and true patriots seek to confirm and strengthen and celebrate the we and we the people of the United States. Let us all be true patriots. Thank you. I'd like to submit this for the record.
Okay. Thank you.
Final speaker, Fred Prejean. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure for me to visit with you. As you know, I'm Fred Prejean, chairman of Move the Mindset. The three gentlemen who preceded me are members of the same organization. As you know, we are a teaching organization, and I want you to know that each time I come before you, I give you a number of civic organizations who are part of our umbrella group. Well, last month it was 15. This month it's 16, and I expect 20 before the end of the year. Why? Because the symbolism of Jim Crow statue in Lafayette is undermining today's constitutional values of this country. This symbolism has taken us from the arc of destruction to the tragedy of despair. I ask, when is Lafayette going to enter the 21st century? An attempt to show empathy, compassion, and respect is being shown nationally through acknowledgement of an inhumane period of our history known as slavery and Jim Crow, but not here in Lafayette. Cities and states are beginning to show recognition and acknowledgement of lynchings, mass murders, and the sanctity of graveyards of slaves, but not here in Lafayette. In the town of Wallace, Louisiana, the Whitney Plantation opened in 2015 as a full-fledged museum with an unvarnished look at the cruelties of slavery in Louisiana. On September 5, 2017, more than a century after armed white mobs shot and killed at least 30 black people in what came to be known as the Thibodeau Massacre, the city of Thibodaux approved a proclamation for these victims on November 14, 2017. The Lafayette Parish Council honored the victims and their families. And most recently, the Shell Oil Company has taken to honor once forgotten slaves buried on its land and to acknowledge unsavory aspects of our state's history. When is Lafayette going to acknowledge the disrespect of the denigrating Jim Crow statute that insults the character, intelligence, and humanity of the people of Lafayette? When? New Orleans has been granted the 2024 Super Bowl game. Can it be because its newly found race relations after moving the Jim Crow statue? Just think of the positive national attention Lafayette might receive if it enhanced its race relations status by moving its Jim Crow statue. Lafayette's initial economy, I'd like to point out, existed as a result of free labor of slaves. This occurred when Lafayette's population was more than 50% of black people. Yes, they were slaves who were made to work to death so Lafayette's economy could be established. And we thank them by honoring a Jim Crow statue and the diminution of the significance of descendants of these slaves. Is that how we thank them? When is Lafayette going to show respect for the citizens whose ancestors enabled this city to have an economy? Mr. Chairman, it is time that we come to the table and begin acting like enlightened, caring community. 110 Jim Crow monuments have been removed nationwide since 2015. 110. That includes monuments from New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport. That's an average of 3 of these monuments being taken down each month. 3 a month is the rate. When it's Lafayette going to do what it's been doing throughout the country? Are we going to wait until the last monument in this state and nation is left before we decide to act? We appreciate your listening to our concerns each month, but it's now time to act. Our commentaries are only statements of research-based facts and aren't intended to make people feel guilty or embarrassed. The truth of these vile Jim Crow monuments transcends race, ethnicity, and party lines. Truth strengthens our resolve as an honorable people and enhances our status as citizens and united people of America. Mr. Chairman, we are aware of the injunction related to this statute, but we are asking today that you establish a committee comprised of council members and our organization to do what problem solvers do, to do what reason dictates, to do what is in the best interest of this, not just of the present, but the future interest of Lafayette. Let us sit and talk for the purpose of seeking a solution to Jim Crow issue. I pray you will honor this request and contact me for the purpose of the request that I have made.
Your 5 minute was up.
Thank you.
I let you go.
I appreciate it too. I just wanted to get out that I was making a request to you to establish a committee to visit with us.
I got you.
I look forward to hearing from you.
If you may give it to Ms. Williams.
I have.
And
I have.
You
sir.
have it?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yes.
I'll take a look at it and I'll give you a call and see what we can do.
Thank you, sir. I did not mean any disrespect.
No, absolutely. And I didn't mean any disrespect either. I just have to follow the rules after 5 minutes. So
I understand.
thank you, Mr. Prejean. Appreciate it. He was the final speaker. Okay. All right. We will now move from comments from the public. And again, item 10, reports and discussion items, that has been taken care of. We had moved the sheriff up earlier. So now we'll go to a public hearing. I now officially open the public hearing for citizen input on the proposed boundaries for the fire district. 5-minute rule is in effect. Cindy, can you please read?
Public hearing on boundaries for fire district.
Okay. This time we'll take any requests, comment from the public.
We have 2 speakers, Andrew Abear, registered city and parish voter.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was hoping y'all would expand the fire district to include the entire parish. Interesting. Kind of like what the sheriff was doing. Interesting. And the taxes collected in the small towns would fund their fire departments, as well as the city of Lafayette. Kind of like a merger of taking two separate budgets and making them into one. Seems like a very simple process. It's a process of merging the two governments into one. So the citizens of the city would pay the same tax as everybody else. And a portion of that tax would help fund the parish, which we are part of. It would also fund our fire department, which we have separate. And I guess the small towns who are not part of consolidation could coordinate an intergovernmental agreement to get a portion of those taxes. So I respectfully request you to enlarge the boundaries of the fire district to include the entire parish and to look into sharing those revenues with the corporate towns that are in it, so we can move forward to a true Lafayette Parish 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next and final speaker, Michael Lunsford.
Good evening, everybody. Things are a little bit out of order from the paper I have, so I'll skip a little bit of this. But the sheriff and I talked last week, and he said something that kind of sparked.
It has to be related to the announcements of the public hearing. This is not about the sheriff.
I understand.
You have to stay to the fire boundaries is what we're talking about.
That's
Anything
right.
related to the sheriff?
That's right. It's related.
It's related? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just make sure we stay on the same line.
Yes, sir. Well, I would have signed up for the sheriff's thing, but anyway. Yeah. Let me get straight to it. In our meeting, he said that in 2002, the sheriff's office made a mistake. They created a special taxing district for the unincorporated areas. Since then, the unincorporated areas have continued to shrink. The tax base has continued to shrink. When I heard that, it kind of struck me because there's a fire district before us this evening, and it's following, seems to me, the very same path of unincorporated only, which, as if I recall last meeting, I didn't make, but I was able to watch a little on video. It's going to be ever shrinking. It has been shrinking for quite some time. So to me, it makes more sense. If there is definitely an issue in fire district, why would we be choosing something that would seem to be kicking the can down the road? Because in a few more years, you'll have to revisit this again when more and more municipalities annex more and more of the unincorporated areas. So that's my statement, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, he was the final speaker.
Final speaker, okay. In regards to, you bring up a good point. The one thing that needs to be noted is the citizens in the city of Lafayette and the municipalities are already currently paying for their fire protection. So these unincorporated areas, which we'll get into here shortly, do not have designated revenue for fire protection. And yes, it does make sense that as annexations continue to take place, although I have not seen that many annexations from Scott or Dusson or Carencro, I think some of that has slowed down compared to years past, other than Broussard and Youngsville. And I'll have a map here shortly to show you a lot of the unincorporated areas are coming from the north and western side of the parish. So, yes, eventually as annexations come through, that particular district would be changing, and we'd have to address it down the road. The thing is, this fire district that we're talking about is what's needed today and in the future, is to protect those unincorporated areas that are currently not having the adequate protection personnel or the equipment to put out the fires. And that's one of the issues that we're facing, and residents in the city and in the other towns are already currently paying. So it makes it a little bit challenging, difficult to get those on board to want to pay into something that they're paying for service, but yet some of these unincorporated areas are getting service without what everyone else is participating in. So, all right, Councilman Terrio.
Thank you. Real quick, Mr. Escott, quick question for you. I was approached, and maybe you can enlighten me how I would respond to this question, is that tonight, well, let's take a step back. 2 weeks ago, we actually had a resolution before the council dealing with the fire district. You remember that? What specifically was that resolution about?
I believe that was the notice of...
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I believe what you're referring to was the notice of formation, or the notice of intent to form the district. There's certain steps that are required, one of which is the notice of intent to form. This public hearing is the second step. Once the public hearing is conducted on a discussion of fixing the boundaries, then the resolution that's to follow, number 7 on the agenda, is an actual formalization of the fixing of those boundaries. And then the last step is the ordinance that is going up for intro tonight that will be finalized on the following meeting, which is the actual creation through the force of law, which is by ordinance, of the district.
Well, you answered everything I was going for, you see, because their question was, why did we have 3 of the same items on the council agenda tonight?
Right.
So public hearing, resolution, and then an introductory ordinance, but this is only dealing with the boundaries.
This is dealing with what we're talking about in that public hearing in this first resolution, number 7, is the establishment and fixing of the boundaries. The introductory ordinance is the formalization in the force of law through the vehicle use of an ordinance of the creation of the district with those boundaries.
The concern that I have is that we're talking about creating a boundary. I understand that. We're setting parameters, markers as to where this will be provided. But yet, we don't have any details on the creation of the boundaries, or how can I say this? What would apply inside the boundary after it's been created. That's what I'm trying to get at, which means I want to make sure that I'm not voting for something or supporting something before I'm going to know what's in it, which means would I vote to support creating a boundary without knowing what we're going to apply to that boundary in the future? Very difficult in that.
Yeah,
it's
maybe
basically a fire protection district.
It's a special
We're going to create a boundary, but yet in the information that's provided to the council, and I went through all of them, the public hearing, resolution, and the introductory ordinance, we have no idea how it's going to be administered. We don't know how it's going to be applied to fire department personnel. Will they be hired full-time, part-time? Will they get benefits? Will they have pensions? Who will administer this fire district? And also, what will the mills be? None of that is in the documentation that's before us tonight.
I believe you do have some of that information in the ordinance, and in fact, I think the council is actually the governing authority of the special fire district.
Right.
So anything related to the creation of the mechanics within the district, or whatever the district would propose to do, would have to come before all 9 of you and be voted on and approved once the district is created as the governing authority of that special fire district.
Right. And I guess, and look, maybe it's just me and the others may not have concerns about it. I just have a concern about voting to create a district without knowing what's going to be applied to the district. I have no details.
I guess the best answer I could give you is that's going to be determined by the governing board of the district once it's created.
Okay, but you would agree at this point, all we have before us is a district. Boundaries are being created and nothing else.
Well, as to this item,
Right.
the resolution,
Right.
yes. As to the intro ordinance, no. I think the introductory ordinance also creates the governing authority for the district as well.
But does not include the
And what's the
parameters
number?
that I had mentioned earlier there.
Doesn't include, I'm sorry, what?
The parameters that I talked about, like the millages being charged, the administrative function, all the details of it.
Right. I don't believe that that particular ordinance, you're correct, has the specifics of all of the meat on the bone in terms of the district, because that ordinance's purpose generally is to simply create that district with its governing authority such that from that point forward, in a special fire district, the purpose of which is, obvious, it could then, the governing authority would then have the ability to add those components or not.
Okay.
But yeah, right.
I appreciate you helping,
Sure.
Gramps. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Councilman Castile.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Terrio, this is the process that we have to follow to form this district. We who worked on this aren't hiding anything. We all know somebody's got to pay for a service, okay? If you don't feel comfortable in it, then you vote against it, like you normally do. That's fine. But this is the process that's put before us through state statute, and we have to follow this process. The next one is a resolution to form the district, and then the ordinance comes out and it dictates who's in charge. And then eventually we'll get to the big bad tax word that you keep talking about, okay? And at that time is when we can discuss who's going to pay for what, or if we're going to pay for anything. But this is the process that we have to go through. You jump from one to the other to try to prove a point. But we all know what you're getting at is you just don't want the tax, which is fine. But don't try to knock the process down. This is the process. We're being transparent with the people. We're telling everyone how this is working and how it's going to work. And then we can debate on the floor how that's going to be paid for. That's the process. Very simple. And I'm not confusing anyone. It's a step-by-step process. It's in your book. Okay? I'll have more to stay on the resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councilman Boudreaux.
Yes, I would like to speak to Mr. Escott. As it relates to Mr. Terrio's concerns, and I think it would be all of our concerns, is what we're doing here illegal today by any chance? Are we on good, solid legal ground by having this public hearing and by then adopting a resolution and then introducing an ordinance? Or are we on good, solid legal ground?
As far as I know, Councilman Boudreaux, I'd like to answer unequivocally yes. I've been told through the assistance of additional counsel that this is the legal and valid way to do this.
Okay. Are we eliminating any mandates, be they federal, state, local? Have we done our due diligence, and are we making sure that we cover all ground? Are we doing everything that we're supposed to do in this same process?
Can you narrow that question down?
Have we left anything out? Is there a mandate that we are aware of that you or your esteemed co-counsel has advised? Is there anything that we should be doing that we're not doing?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And again, my purpose for my questions is to alleviate any thought that this council is doing anything illegal, inappropriate, irresponsible, because I don't want to be a part of that.
Right.
Okay? As I look at this process, as Councilman Castile has indicated, this is what the state constitution, and this is what the state legislature has said. If you want to do this, create a district, this is what you must do.
That's correct.
Now, he brings up another good point. We create a district, and there seems to be some questions unanswered as who do what, when, why, how, etc. So if we create this district and do nothing beyond the creation of this district, are we at risk of being penalized, fined, sued, held accountable in any way for creating a district to consider anything that is legally able to be considered within that district, but choose not to do anything at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you. So you are our attorney, along with the counsel who assisted with the drafting of these documents based on the process before us. Well, I thank you for that. And with that said, I'm comfortable in going forward at this time with the public hearing and next the adoption of a resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Boudreaux. Councilman Terrio.
Yeah, just to answer a couple of questions. Guys, first of all, I was very careful not to say hide, because that was not my intent. I'm not saying hide. I had one individual that had contacted me in order to explain the procedure, which is the 3 items. We've been doing this, Mr. Boudreaux, a long time, 11 years, right? How many times did we see 3 items of the exact same thing on the agenda, resolution, and public hearing? We can maybe count that on 2 fingers. So, and you always ask the question that I ask, because I always ask legal counsel, are we doing anything that is not within the legal boundaries? So there was no pun accepted and no pun intended in that. Mr. Escott can explain the procedure as was posed to me a lot better than I can to individuals listening and watching. And as you guys know, I mean, I'm just going to ask the question, but no, I'm never not saying anybody's hiding anything and that anybody's doing anything wrong. It's just, as y'all know, I have concerns and I have questions, and that's all it was. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Escott.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Terrio. Councilman Castillo. You good? All right.
All right, thank you, sir. I want to make a comment about the shrinking of the unincorporated areas and the shrinking of the taxes that were brought up by one of the speakers. We looked at this, and we all know that the unincorporated areas continue to shrink. So does the tax base. So if and when a tax is proposed by this council to send to the public for a vote, in my mind, as the incorporated areas shrink, the tax base shrinks, so the need for fire protection in those areas shrink. So it coincides with each other all the way down. And eventually one day, who knows, everything will be annexed, don't need no more taxes. But that's the concept that I have in my mind, is that as it shrinks, so does the money, so does the area that needs to be protected. So it kind of all goes together.
And at that point, it would fall on that
Municipality
who would annex.
Annexes the property is responsible for that area. So it's going to follow itself all the way until it's extinct, in my mind. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Cole.
Much has been said about the unincorporated areas shrinking, but lest we forget there are 70,000 people who live in the unincorporated area. That's about 30% of our entire parish population that we're addressing tonight. Thank you.
Councilman Terrio.
Yes, and that is correct. I think it's close to between 65 and 70, Mr. Kong. But one thing about the unincorporated, the majority of the unincorporated is residential homes. That's all it is. There's hardly any sales tax revenue at all. Any business that even remotely thinks about popping its head up in the unincorporated gets annexed immediately by another municipality. We know that. So, and what Mr. Castillo said earlier, look, that's his idea about and what he believes about the shrinking base. It's just the concern that I have, and a lot of questions, is that with the annexations that are occurring, the shrinking of the base. I mean, just one question. We create a boundary. Somebody is included in the boundary when the boundary is made, but then within 6 months, they're annexed into a municipality. How is that going to be calculated? How do we know who's going to pay what? Do they pay 6 months worth of however many mills? I don't know. It's just that there are still annexations. We're not going to stop them. As I said 2 weeks ago, my thoughts is that, and the more I dig into it, the only solution is to divvy up the unincorporated areas, and every municipality needs to take a piece of it. Because it will continue to decline, and we'll be doing this in 2 or 3 years, guys. So anyway, let's move on to the resolution. That's all I have for now.
Okay. Councilman Boudreaux.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I know there was a request to move on to the resolution, but I just wanted to follow up what Mr. Castillo said, because there was a comparison by the speaker about the sheriff saying that there was a mistake made in '02. I think it needs to be acknowledged that the difference between this proposal and what the then sheriff in '02 did was that the sheriff's services expanded, whereas what is envisioned as it relates to fire services through annexation will decrease. And the sheriff stood here also and talked about services beyond what he normally provides. So what his needs are today is related to his obligations in the jail. He talked about services he provides in every municipality. He talked about trim crews and the need for supervision when they're out on the streets. So as it relates to growth and shrinkage for this particular conversation, I would say that the difference between what is being considered here and what the sheriff acknowledged or referred to as a mistake is that, Mr. Castillo said it right, you will have a shrinking at every level, as opposed to what the sheriff was alluding to was there was a shrinkage in the ability to collect, but there was an expansion in the need for services. Whereas here, when an annexation takes place, the need for service goes with it. The responsibility don't remain when the financial or whatever resources available goes away. So not quite apples and apples. It was a good analogy and comparison, but just not quite the same because the shrinkage is through and through. So I just wanted to say that as well, based on what Mr. Castillo acknowledged.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is that it for public comment, Ms. B? Okay. At this time, I need to announce that with there being no additional comments on the proposed boundaries, I am now closing the public hearing. We will now move to resolutions. This is a public hearing, and electronic sign-in is available for anyone wishing to address the council. The 5-minute rule does apply. Before I ask Ms. Cindy to read, we talked about transparency. We talked about being truthful. We talked about being upfront and honest. So I took the luxury of contacting my homeowner's insurance company and played the scenario out of what is my house and my homeowners currently costing me today at a class 5. We have some slides, Jeremy. I'm sorry, Joseph. Be more than glad to give you my address if you want to come by and visit me, look at my house. I'm going to be as transparent as it comes because I didn't want to pull numbers out of the sky and I didn't want to do a scare tactic. Okay, this is true. I live in the unincorporated areas of this parish and representative of District 1. Council members, I've provided you my insurance policies in your folder for you to take a look at. But for the public and for the media, what you will see right here is full coverage on my home, premium for residential dwelling valued at $272. That's on the tax assessor's website with $75,000 homestead exemption, and I have hurricane coverage. That's not including additional flood insurance that I purchase on the side. And I'm not, quote unquote, in a flood zone, but I live next to a coulee. As you can tell, currently this year, at a class 5 for my home, and the insurance company is ASI. Feel free to call tomorrow if you live in an unincorporated area. Call Farm Bureau, call State Farm, call your insurance company. I think everybody needs to do that, because this is going to be a true testament of what this community is going to be up against and what we're going to ultimately, hopefully, get a chance to decide on. So at a class 5, my annual premium is $3,132. Chief Benoit's in the back. Chief, if you want to comment, please do so. We currently stand at 5.99 as our class rating. Close, basically call it a 6, right, if we're going to round. Right, Chief? We're good? Okay. My insurance is going to go up to $7,546 a year. That is a $4,414 increase, with still lack of tanker trucks, lack of personnel, lack of response. So while I tried expressing this importance of creating this district and the importance of the unincorporated areas, understanding what is at risk, I've been told I'm using scare tactics. I'm just trying to, I had some people message me and say, I'd rather pay the insurance increase. Really? Do we know what that costs? Let me tell you, call your insurance company, give them the $4,000, ask them if they come and put your house out, if your house is on fire. Because the truth of the matter is, if you choose to pay the insurance company, you choose to do nothing, you're going to pay one way or the other. It's going to be, in my case, $4,414 increase. I got 3 children, ages 13, 11, and 7. Graduation, college, driving. We've all been there. What does the unincorporated area want to do? If I don't live in an unincorporated area, I can stand for no taxes myself. I can say, nope, I'm hearing my people, no taxes. But that would be very selfish, because it wouldn't be affecting me. So it's easy to vote no on something if you're not going to be the one affected. In this case, me personally, I will be affected, as well as 65 to 70,000 other residents. So this is my policy here. If it goes to an 8, we're at $8,942 a year. I didn't even go to class 9 or 10 because it's irrelevant, because it goes to 11,000 and up to 17,000 a year. Class 5 people, close to 6. We have done nothing in the previous years other than buy CBs, radios, and walkie-talkies to try to convince the rating people to keep us at a class 5. We don't need no more radios. We don't need no more CBs and walkie-talkies. We need firemen. Our tanker trucks are 20 years old. Fire breaks out between District 1 and 5. We rely on Dusson, Scott, and Judice to man that station. If one of the tanker trucks, the water trucks, is down, then what you going to do? And when they are getting there, there's 2 people on a fire truck. Can't fight a fire with 2. So someone always says, man, one little garage fire, one shed fire, you took 5 municipalities to respond. Why you did that? Because you don't have any personnel. You don't have fire hydrants in an unincorporated area. These insurance companies look at these ratings. They look what you have in place. All of that has consequences. If we don't meet the standards, if we don't protect our people in the unincorporated areas, you're going to pay for it. I just want the unincorporated areas to have the same opportunity that the city of Lafayette does. What's our rating in the city of Lafayette, Chief? Thank you, sir. Do you know if the unincorporated area goes from a 5 to a 4, gets down to a 3, how much money you're going to save in the unincorporated areas? But we can't even get there if we don't even bring a solution. We can't get there if we don't address it and look at it honestly. This is my policy here. This is public. You can have it. You can look at it. I got all the copies you need. This is not fake. This is the truth. This is transparency. This is exactly what it cost you in an unincorporated area. Should you do nothing? Should we do nothing? Should we not even talk about it, turn our cheeks, and then somebody's going to get a big bill next year, and then they're going to want to know why? I'm here to tell you, I want you all in the unincorporated areas to have the same equal and opportunity as the residents in Lafayette and the surrounding towns, that their class ratings are anywhere from a 2 to a 3. Move to the next slide, please. To put a little bit more perspective in this thing, the shaded areas, the reddish all the way to the western side of the parish, that is the municipality of Dusson. The purple is Scott, green is Carencro, blue is the city of Lafayette, and my eyes are bad, but Broussard is in yellow, and I think Youngsville's in this taupe kind of color, or taupe, orange, brown, whatever. Moral of the story is the areas that is not shaded with a color represents what? Represents the unincorporated areas. That's just 65 to 70,000 people. That is me. Districts 2, 1, 5, and 9 represent majority of the unincorporated areas per Mr. Andrew back there. Broussard and Youngsville has annexed so much that they represent probably, according to the numbers, about 2%. Whereas District 5, District 1, and District 2, we carry a lot of unincorporated areas. And those people want the same amount of service. So let's just, on a typical fire that happens between Scott and Dusson, the southern part of District 5, Dusson is going to leave their town in which their people pay for fire protection. They're going to abandon their town and come fight this fire in the unincorporated area. Then Scott's coming. Then we're going to have Judice. If Judice has someone there to fight the fire, because we're struggling with volunteers. And Councilman Bell and I have had those discussions, and we're trying to do what we can. But people don't want to volunteer. They have their own personal lives, their own jobs, their own family. So when Judice can't respond, then Chief Benoit is going to send a truck out of Lafayette. And then Mr. Terrio's district, Milton Water District, like Judice, is not in a town, so they solely depend on LCG for funding to help respond to these people. So Milton's going to come. Meantime, you pull in all of these fire resources from these people to fight fire in an unincorporated area that currently has no dedicated millage and no funding. Basically are getting that service for FREE. Meantime, those other municipalities and towns are leaving their people who are paying a millage and dedicated fire protection, leaving their own people vulnerable. That's the truth. That's the facts. The map's on the table. The unincorporated area is a lot. Population-wise, we're not that, but every human being, every life counts. That is why this district is being created. That is why the thought process that as we continue to battle budget woes and we don't have funding for the courthouse and jailhouse and we're cutting DA and we're cutting judges, we're paying those small towns currently out of the parish general fund, whatever money we have. We know from a year and a half ago when one town didn't get enough money to respond because they were getting 500 calls, and everybody was getting the same amount of money, they just quit responding. We don't want that. But it's a business. Not many of us can operate at all without revenue. So I put this out here because I want transparency. I want you to know that as an unincorporated representative, that I'm not doing my job if I don't give my people an opportunity. I'm not imposing a tax. I'm not passing a tax. I'm giving you truth, transparency, and knowledge of what our area is up against here shortly. That's where we at. I'll be more than glad, media, anybody out in the audience have any questions. I strongly would recommend, if you are in the unincorporated areas, please call your insurance company tomorrow. Please let them give you your current rate, and then let them give you what it would be if you move up to a Class 7 or higher. Okay? Coverage is different. Some people may put more on their dwelling, more on liability. I gave you what I have. Hurricane insurance, dwelling, liability, property, the whole 9 yards. That's just one example. Okay? All right. So now we will go to resolutions, and we'll ask Ms. Cindy to go ahead and read the resolution.
Resolution 40, 2018, a resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council, Parish of Lafayette, State of Louisiana, providing notice of the formation of a special fire district in said parish, describing the boundaries thereof, ordering and directing the Lafayette Mayor President to give due notice of the formation of said fire protection district, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
Got a motion by Castile. I have a second by Councilman Boudreaux. Council discussion. Mr. Terrio, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, Chief Benoit, could you come up, please? Chief, just a couple of quick questions to get with you on the PIALs. And for the public, what does that stand for?
Property Insurance Association of Louisiana.
Which is done how often? An evaluation?
Depending on the classification that you receive, it's normally done every 5 years from a Class 1 to a Class 5. Anything past that, it depends on them coming back every 10 years. And then also you can get put back in a pool where even though you receive your rating in 1 year and you have 5 years for another rating, they can come back the following year to make sure that you haven't stop doing what got you the class.
But normally it's 5 years
5
or
years,
more.
right. Between 5 and 10 years, depending on what classification you are.
Okay. In the unincorporated last year, what was the rating last year, 2017?
Right now we're going through a rating review as we speak. That was for 5 years when they looked at the last 3 years of service. The last rating that we're operating under as of today is a Class 5 in the parish and a Class 2 in the city of Lafayette.
599.
It was 5 in the parish, right?
Yeah, it's 50. Well, it's 49.999. It's right at 50 percentage points, because in the class rating from a 1 to a 10, with a 1 being the best, a 10 being the worst, you can get a maximum of 100 points in between those ranges, because the fire rating bureau looks at 3 components in fire protection. They look at how do you receive calls and dispatch calls for a maximum of 10 points. Or they look at your fire department, where your stations are, how many people you have, how you train, and your certifications for a maximum of 50 points. And they look at your water distribution center for a maximum of 40 points, to give you a total of 100 points in each range.
Okay. And on the PIAL, is that public? Is that information that is provided to the public?
Yes.
It's a public document.
Yes.
Okay. So in the last 10 years, has the unincorporated ever been above a 5?
No.
15 years.
Last 3 ratings, they've been at a Class 5, which last 15 years, yes.
So the next question would be, why would we think that we're going to increase to a higher rating if the unincorporated is shrinking and being taken over by more municipalities? Why would the rating in the unincorporated go up if the amount that needs to be covered is shrinking?
Okay, when you look at the class ranges that I just spoke of, you have the opportunity in every range to get a maximum of 100 points. I'll use Lafayette as an example, then I'll get into the parish. In the city of Lafayette, we enjoy a Class 2 fire rating. In that Class 2 fire rating, you have 10 points in there that you can 100 points that you can get in there. So when you look at what we have in the city of Lafayette, we're at a class 2, but we're at kind of on the low scale of a class 2, 83.5 percentage points. Okay, so in good years, when government is doing well and more money is given to the department, then that class rating can go up to 89 or 90, 89 percentage points. Because when you get to 90 percentage points, then you're in a class 1. Looking at the parish rating, and that's something that I've been speaking about over the past 20 years, considering how the class ranges work and looking at how much money is put into fire protection, we have been losing percentage points in those ranges. We've stayed in the class 5 range, but the maximum points that you receive in that range have been depleted because of the way the growth is in those areas, in the areas that the fire protection district has to take, the fire department has to respond to. We're not putting a lot of money into it, then you start to see those percentage points drop. In this particular case, the last rating, which took place 5 years ago, we pretty much lost that rating. But because of the relationship with the fire departments and the rating bureau, they gave us an opportunity to make that up. And we made it up by buying some additional radios. But for the past 20 years, I've been talking about this. And this is where we are now, to where there is no more room. You're going to move to a class 6, maybe a class 7, based on what you have done over the past 5 years. Because even though we kept that class rating at a 5 in the parish, we haven't done anything to improve fire protection services up to this point. So it stands to reason that if you started losing your rating in percentage points, even though you kept it in that class, from 20 years up to now, the trend is if you do nothing to enhance fire protection, you're going to lose those percentage points and you're going to move to the next rating, which will be a class 6 or a class 7. That's the position that we're in right now. Because we're being graded right now, we won't know what that outcome is until probably January or February of next year, because we have been placed on notice earlier this year, and they're looking at our books, both city and parish. They are coming back in November to finalize looking at all of the books and everything that we say we do as a fire department in the city, and then they're going to come back in the middle of November and finish up the parish. And then they're going to go back home, calculate all those numbers, look at that, and come back and give you the results. So if the results are that you didn't do what they needed you to do over the past 5 years, and there are recommendations that they give you in every rating. When they give you the results, they give you recommendations on how you can improve your rating and how you can sustain what you already have. Then they'll give you an opportunity to discuss what you want to do in the event that you lose your rating. Because if you lose your rating, what they call regression, then there's an opportunity to get it back, but you're going to go to that new class. And the minute you go to that new class, the insurance companies are going to look at that and make a determination as to what it's going to cost you for insurance premiums. I know I said a whole lot and I talked about more than you asked, but I got to give it to you that way so you can understand what's going on.
Okay, now you're saying the final PIALs, the new one's going to come out in January, February?
January, February of next year, depending on their workload. But they're coming here this year. Right now, we're in the middle of that rating. They look at what you've done over the past 3 years, even though it's every 5 years. And just because you maintain it doesn't mean that they're not going to come back a year later and say, let's look at your books again. Okay. Because even though you get it or you're lucky in getting it, then you still have to maintain what you have in the event they put you back in the pool. But because of their workload, they've put us on notice that they're coming in November and December, and we should have some results by January or February of next year.
Now, if somebody were to have told me that they think that our new the rating that's coming out in January, February is going to stay around a 5, would you be surprised?
Again, I am not going to speak for the rating bureau because there's a lot that's entailed in that. I can only give you the trend and the pattern. And I'll go back to what I've been saying for the past 20 years. If you look at how you've been falling in percentage points within the city, within the parish, there's a chance that you're going to lose that rating. Nobody want to be on the end of a bad rating. So that's why we give you the information up front. I'm going to give you a prime example, case in point. Back in 2001, I think it was when we opened up fire stations 12 and 13. At that time, we were a high class 2. 87.88 percentage points. But we went through the rating before we opened up those stations. So a year later, the rating bureau contacted me and asked me if I would consider going through another rating because we could have possibly got a class 1, the best rating you could possibly get. And I turned it down. The reason why I turned it down was it would have been a low class 1 rating. And when you're dealing with government, you have some good years and you have some bad years. And so to take that class 1 rating would have been bragging rights. However, 4 or 5 years down the road, when government didn't have the money that it needed, and the fire department was going to suffer for that, we would have lost that class 1 rating, and insurance premiums would be going back up. So what I'm telling you is that what I've been saying for the past 20 years is that nobody want to be on the bad side of a rating, so we give you that information up front every 5 years based on the recommendations and tell you, get yourself ready, some things are happening. If you do nothing and you stay the status quo, there's a possibility you're going to lose it. I can't tell you exactly 100% that you're going to lose it because I'm not the one looking at the books. I have to wait till they compile everything together, look at it, and then we go from there.
Okay. Chief, we've had this discussion before a number of times over the almost decade, and wouldn't it seem obvious, and I think you would agree, is that the more that, say, Lafayette, because Lafayette's the primary annexator, or annexation municipality of the unincorporated, is that the more they annex, then the more pressure it puts on you to provide more fire protection for the annexed individuals, which there in turn will require more fire stations needed for the city of Lafayette if you keep annexing more and more property.
That's pretty much how it works. The more you grow, the bigger you get, the more services you need to provide to your constituents. So it stands to reason. Here we are in 2018, and we've got 14 fire stations. In 1979, we had 7 fire stations.
Yep.
But the population of the city of Lafayette, I think, was around 65,000. And so now we're up to 125,000. So as you grow, your organizations have to grow with it to provide those same services.
Okay. One final question, Chief. What group of individuals is comprised of the PIAL?
The PIL's association falls under the state of Louisiana, and it's connected to the insurance companies and the state of Louisiana. And they make up that entity that determines what a fire department should look like based on the class that you want to be a part of. And again, this is a voluntary thing. You can choose not to be not to go through the grading process and just take your class 10 automatically, like you have no fire protection at all. So it's up to a city or municipality to determine what they want to do. They make that up. Now, there's also an organization called the Insurance Service Office, or ISO. That organization is in the majority of the states across the United States. PIL only operates in the state of Louisiana, but there are other states that also uses the same formula that PIL used to maintain their fire protection in their jurisdictions.
Okay, I thought I read that the PIAL here locally or in the state is not a state-created organization. They're just an organization that, like you mentioned, are made up of insurance executives and other individuals that go and evaluate at the request of municipalities in order to give these ratings.
It's my understanding that it's a licensed organization sanctioned by the state to be able to regulate fire departments and grade fire departments so that insurance companies can make a decision as to how they're going to bill homeowners and businesses for fire protection in the event that they need it.
All right. Chief, thank you so much. Appreciate it. That's all I have, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilman Boudreaux.
I need you to stay a little longer. Please help me interpret some of these items I have before me. I guess as it relates to the importance of what's taking place here today, I want to transition just a little bit from insurance premiums and shrinking areas of incorporation to who pays for what. On Father's Day, unfortunately, as I was traveling to my destination where they was honoring the fathers of our family, I noticed some trucks took off, and immediately I said they're leaving the city. So their destination ended up being Cloud Drive. Cloud Drive is right at the border of Lafayette and St. Martin Parish, right out there past the Derby Heights area, past Seafood Lane, almost adjacent to the river. So I just want to I need to clear up some things that I didn't quite understand. So when I look at a fire report and it says engine number, does that represent a station?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm going to call out some numbers to you, and if you can, I need to know the exact location. I know the location of two of them, but I don't know the location of the others. So engine number 2, that's Mud Avenue, right?
By the golf course.
Say that again?
That's by the golf course.
Golf
Mud
course,
Avenue,
Mud Avenue.
and Louisiana Avenue. Right.
Okay. Engine number 3.
That's Martin Luther King and Cooper. That's by Queen of Peace Church in the Truman area.
Truman area, okay. Engine 4, that's West Alexander.
It's Alexandra by Bros Martin.
Okay. Engine 5.
Engine 5 is Johnson Street by UL.
By the old Ute Park.
Right, yes.
In engine 24.
Truck 24 is from Station 4 in Alexandria. In that particular station,
That's 2
you've
trucks,
got a
okay.
pumper and an aerial truck that services that area.
So they sent 4 trucks from 4.
That's correct.
That's even worse than I thought. That means my house was unprotected. I mean, we sent everything outside the city limits to take care of a fire.
That particular area is an area that needed some protection based on the distance that the closest station that should respond to that between the contract of the parish and the city for fire protection services.
Karen Crow.
Right. The Karen Crow area was at one time serviced that area. And so a decision was made years ago that because of the distance, it's too far for that station to respond and be effective. And when you look at the rating bureau's recommendations for stations, it falls outside of that class range, so it's like not having any fire protection at all.
That's great information, because that shows the importance of what this initiative...
That was one issue that caused the change. The other issue had to do with the problems that you have with trying to send a station from that far through a city, passing up other fire stations that are already there to be able to provide protection in that particular area with the chance of having a vehicle accident.
But based on that location, originally, the responsible responding department for fire protection at that eastern boundary was the Karen Crow Volunteer Fire Department.
That's correct.
And then because of all the issues that you just named, Lafayette took it over.
That's correct.
Okay. And they started paying taxes as every other city of Lafayette resident do for that service.
No, they're not. They're not paying for the services that they're receiving. They are in the parish, and so whatever taxes they are paying parish taxes, but they're enjoying the response services from a department with a Class 2 fire rating.
Okay.
And the reason why they're getting...
Hold that right there, if you don't mind. Thank you so much, Chief. What does R1 mean?
Residential 1.
Residential 1, I think, on the zoning.
That's Rescue 1? That's still... I'm looking at the report that says engine.
R1 is Rescue 1. That's one of the rescue trucks that's assigned to Station 2 on Mud Avenue.
Okay. And what about HM1?
That's Hazmat 1. That's the hazmat truck located at Station 5 on Johnson Street.
Okay. And what does Squad represent?
Squad 1 is a rescue truck that consists of high angle and confined space rescue, a specialty squad that's located on Bertrand Drive across from Service Chevrolet.
Okay. 50. Squad 50?
Unit 50 would be the assistant chief that's in charge of the whole platoon for the fire department that's working that day. They would respond to a typical structure fire.
Squad 51?
That's one of the district chief's units that's located, I think, in District 1.
So everything in the 50 number is going to be like a chief level person?
Right. That'll be either your chief officers, district chiefs, or you may have some investigators involved in that as well.
68?
68 is a fire investigator that showed up at that scene.
Okay. So I'm trying to interpret this report here. Apparatus refers to vehicles, equipment?
Okay, right.
So they got the number 14. So did we send 14 different type of units, whether it was a district chief and a vehicle or truck?
14 different units responded to that one particular call.
Okay. and personnel says 28. That means 28.
That's the number of people that responded to that call that came on those 14 units.
Right. Everything from district chiefs to investigators down to firefighters.
That's correct.
Okay. So this is why it's important to me. So you name a couple of units that left Mud Avenue and Station 2. You name, I think it was Hazmat. Is that 2?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. In Engine 2, how many trucks you have at Engine 2, at Station 2?
Three units, an engine company, a rescue squad, and a district chief.
Right. So all 3 of them went to this location.
That's correct.
So at that point, that's when the radio people, the dispatchers, start kind of moving people around. So if something was to happen, like they have some folks here from Macomb, Vise, Sterling area, Nickerson and Parkerson, which is very close to Station 2. If something was to happen, then they would have sent a station from like almost in Abbeville, almost in Broussard or somewhere.
Let me give you
They'll have coverage.
Let me give you the
Coverage with a
scenario
swing back.
so you can understand what's going on. Let me give you the scenario. Because you're dealing with a fire department that's responding to anywhere within the city of Lafayette or in that particular area there, it's going to be a full response. So a full response on a single residential call is going to generate 3 fire apparatus, which are pumpers, 1 ladder or aerial truck, which would have been truck 24, the district chief in that unit, in that district as well, and then the assistant chief makes a determination as to he wants to respond as well. However, you get the other 3 district chiefs to respond to that call because they act as safety officers. So we need their eyes and their ears to be able to guide the firefighters who are out there in the thick of things trying to extinguish this fire. So on any typical structure fire, that's how Lafayette Fire Department responds. That's required by the rating as far as it dictates to be able to get to be successful in being able to extinguish a fire within as soon as possible.
Right.
So
and
that's what you're
job.
seeing there.
Yeah,
okay.
They did a great job. Matter of fact, one of the guys told me his job was to keep the road clear as the trucks come in and out, to make sure that no innocent bystander or non-personnel gets in the way.
Now, to answer your question, since I've pretty much identified how things work, that means that any other area within that district that calls for service means that some stations would have to leave the other areas of the district to respond to that call to take care of their need while those companies were tied up on that other call.
Right. So in the significance of that for me is that we got this thing called mutual aid, right? In addition to Lafayette just took this area over. But other than that, there's something called mutual aid. So what we did was we took the service that is being paid for by a certain population of people, and we deployed it to people who don't pay for it because they needed it.
That's correct.
So the people who pay for it, although they was not without service, they then became dependent upon a service from another location if it would have become necessary.
Right, because...
Right. Now, I don't want to exaggerate it because, again, I'm like Ms. Naki. I don't want to make scare tactics, but the fact of the matter is, Mr. Terrio, through his efforts in trying to find solutions, he said that the only solution that he sees is for each municipality to pick some areas and take care of it. But who's going to pay for it? The city of Lafayette is paying for services to this population that we're trying to find an answer for. And like Mr. Nakan said, Scott residents pay for their fire department.
Right.
Youngsville residents pay for their fire department. Lafayette residents pay for their fire department. So this is the only area who's not paying for fire services.
Let me qualify that.
Okay.
They are paying for some services. They are paying the same amount that everybody else is paying, that the contract between LCG on the parish and the city, on the parish side, has with the volunteers. Because the contract that LCG has with the volunteers to provide fire protection services in the unincorporated areas, they also have that contract with the city of Lafayette for the Lafayette Fire Department to respond.
Is that like what we call a mutual aid agreement?
No, that's not a mutual aid agreement. That's pretty much a contractual obligation because the parish is paying the city of Lafayette to provide a fire inspector, communications officer, and one truck into the unincorporated areas for fire protection services, similar to what the contract calls for with the volunteers. In this particular case, why they're receiving more than they normally would have received is because we made a decision to send a full response, which can change at any minute, because they're only obligated to get one truck if that truck is available to meet their needs. But because of the protocol, and the same protocol is being used in the parish with everybody else, because if you get a call in the Scott area, where Scott's protecting that particular area, then depending on who's closer, it could be Dusson coming to help Scott, or it could be Judy's coming to help Scott, or it could be Lafayette coming, depending on where it's at.
So the contractual agreement is one truck, one supervisor, one district chief?
A contract agreement is the truck. We choose to send a supervisor for safety purposes and accountability purposes to make sure that we have more than just that one truck responding to that call.
We're giving a lot. We're giving well beyond what the contract calls for.
Well, in this particular case, they're getting the advantage of having a full response with a Class 2 fire department that they're only paying for services for one truck coming out of the parish area. So they're getting way more than they pay for.
I like the way you say that they got the services of a Class 2 fire department.
That's correct.
Although they actually live in a Class 5 area.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So with that said, let me move to mutual aid. I understand that to be that we have a mutual aid agreement to provide services, again, outside the jurisdiction of the city of Lafayette.
A mutual aid agreement is an agreement between fire departments.
Okay.
So what that is because right now, which is probably going to change if y'all approve it, the fire protection is handled city and parish among the 8 fire departments, Lafayette being one and the other 7 volunteer fire departments through an association. We come together as chiefs and we pretty much identify how fire protection is going to work, so that way we're always covering each other's area on what you call the mutual aid agreement. So if there's a large fire in the city of Lafayette that's going to tax all of our equipment and personnel, then the mutual aid agreement kicks in to have the volunteer fire departments to respond to assist us, or to respond and take over our fire stations to be able to respond to other calls while we tackle this particular situation. That's where the mutual aid agreement comes in. It's an agreement between each organization to take care of each other's needs. The same way when you have a situation in Scott or Dusson or Youngsville or anywhere else in the parish, and they need assistance, then Lafayette comes to them under that mutual aid agreement.
So our agreements are between the city of Lafayette and every municipality within the parish of Lafayette.
That's correct.
And our contractual agreement is between the city of Lafayette and the parish of Lafayette.
For the city fire department.
Yeah, for the city
and
fire
then the
department.
other contract agreement is between the parish and the volunteers.
Right.
But those are not mutual aid agreements. Those are contractual agreements for fire protection services.
Okay. So, as other options was presented, and this is for legal also, I had previously asked for the ability to charge residents outside of the city of Lafayette for fire services, like direct billing. I don't know if we made any progress on that yet. I know we're not in budget yet, but as we look at options on who pays for what and how the city of Lafayette gets made whole through the services they offered, we're going to still be in need of that to see the legality of engaging insurance companies for damage to their properties. So in here, the property loss that was identified between property and contents was well less than $10,000. Do you have a way of telling us what did it cost to deploy those 14 apparatus and those 28 individuals? I think you have shared
Yes,
with us.
I don't have that number tonight, but I can tell you right now that the cost would be the number of trucks based on how per hour, the amount of water that was used to extinguish that fire, the cost for the salaries per hour for each individual that responded to that call, and the duration of that call. That I can get you and tell you that this would have cost the homeowner had we charged them or billed them for the services on that particular day.
And you all did that, I think, recently with the little explosion thing in Doosan or somewhere.
Flowchem, right. What happens is on any type of hazardous material incident, what we can do is we can bill the company for the spill or the incident, and we do that by authority of the state police. Because anytime you're dealing with any type of chemical situation, state police is in charge of that. And so they'll come in, they'll regulate it, we'll come in and extinguish the fire and mitigate the situation. And then we'll come back and we'll bill that company for all of our hours that we responded, for the truck, the use of the trucks, the water, damage to gear, and if there are some health issues involved, we'll bill them for that as well. So we have a formula for that, and that would be the same formula we would use if we were to bill a resident for the number of trucks that responded to a call.
And that's actually what I wanted to just make a point, that this isn't like an initial request. You all have done this in the past, and there's a formula that's already available to determine that number.
That's correct.
So, and I appreciate that. If you could get that to me at your convenience, I would appreciate that for future use.